you a virgin? If not, please explain.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey, I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. Today, we're talking about Girl Defined again. We have talked about Girl Defined before. We talk about religious fundamentalism fairly regularly on the channel. We are revisiting the topic today because there's a video on their channel called How to Avoid Anxiety in a Romantic Relationship. It just seems like a really nice intersection of bad dating advice and bad mental health advice. So we're talking about that today. Just as an aside, I'm not really sure why the views on this video are so low. It's listed as unlisted on their channel. Like, it's not public, but it's on a playlist, so it is kind of public. I'm gonna link it in the description, so hopefully it doesn't disappear. They have posted about it on their social media, so I'm assuming that they intended for this to be public, but it's on their channel, so we're talking about it. Really quick before we get into it, I want to give the caveat that I always give when we talk about religious fundamentalism. This video in particular, but the content that we make about religious fundamentalism generally, is not intended to be a critique or a judgment about regular, normal Christian people or regular religious people at all. We talk about Girl Defined and religious fundamentalism because it's fundamentalism and it's like so far on the cusp or like off on the far end of the spectrum in terms of what can be considered religion that we are starting to tiptoe into cult territory, and they peddle a lot of very harmful and hateful and actively hurtful beliefs to very vulnerable populations, and they openly admit this, that they target their content to very vulnerable people, specifically adolescent and young, like teen women, who are in a very volatile and emotional time in their lives, and they use very predatory tactics to try and suck people into their religious beliefs, and then shame them and gaslight them into believing that they are inherently wrong and shameful and bad, and like all kinds of terrible and toxic things that are the antithesis of what we know from the research about having a healthy self-esteem, sense of self, healthy mental health, how to be resilient and like avoid risk factors associated with mental illness. So like all around, generally very bad. That's why we're talking about this. I don't take any beef with Kristen and Bethy personally, but I do take a lot of beef with their content. It's like a joke. I swear to God, we're not doing this on purpose. My cat really is just like upset. Okay, all of that said, let's get into it. Let's watch the video.
Are you a podcaster? You should check out Riverside.
Not yet, but I'm gonna be. Okay, let's watch this video.
What's up, sisterhood? It is just Kristen here, and we're going to be unpacking a question that one of you asked in a recent live that we did over on Instagram. And it's a question I think a lot of you in relationships wrestle with or want an answer to. And it's this idea of battling anxiety in a romantic relationship, feeling anxious, wrestling with that, and wondering, is this okay? Should I be feeling anxious? How do I battle this? How do I handle this? What does that look like? So in this video, I'm just gonna walk us through some really simple tools, some simple steps biblically based that will help you figure out, like, is your anxiety rooted in a fear that's an actual legitimate fear and concern that you need to address? Or is it rooted in a lack of trusting God for the relationship process? Is it good? Is it bad? Let's discover that. Before
We haven't even made it a full minute into the video. And we are already doing the thing where we blame people's mental illness on a lack of faith or a lack of trust in God. Yikes, Kristen. Why with this? Like, okay, so let's unpack this. Before we talk about that, I am super excited to introduce you guys to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Bright Sellers. I am super excited to be partnering with them because my husband and I have actually spent our own hard-earned money dollars on Bright Sellers before this partnership, and we really enjoyed it. My husband and I have actually kind of bonded over wine. It's a thing that we have developed our palate together as we've gotten older, and we found Bright Sellers to be useful both as like wine newbies where we didn't know what we were doing, and now as we're like slightly older people who like maybe know slightly more about wine. The reason that we love Bright Sellers so much is because they have a super easy quiz. It's only 7 questions that helps you to identify your palate and figure out what wines would be a good match for you. So you take your quiz. It's very fun. My husband and I took it together, and they match you to wines specifically for you. And they also match you with private label wines you can't just buy at any old store. So you're getting special wine that is specifically matched for you based on the things that you like and dislike. So my husband and I took the quiz together, and we got our box today. We opened it and I was very excited to see that there are some wines in there that we've tried before and we know that we love them, but there's also some new ones that we've never tried. The other thing that Bright Cellars does that I think is super fun is they give you these cute little wine education cards that have tasting notes on the back, and they also give you like friendly tips about how to store your wine and what temperature to serve your wine and all of that type of stuff, which is what I mean when I say that Bright Cellars is helpful for you like learning more about wine and developing your palate. This wine that we're trying today is called Paper Tiger. I have never heard of this before, but my husband and I tried it earlier and we were very excited that it was the nice in between for both of our palates. So if you want to try Bright Cellars, they're actually giving all of my followers a 50% off discount, which means that you get your first 6-bottle box for $55, which if you know anything about the cost of wine is kind of wild. So go click the link in my description, or I will also have a link in the comments, and you can get your first 6-bottle box for 50% off. Please go show Bright Cellars some love because they're supporting my channel and my content, helps me to make content like this, especially reaction style content. So it would mean a lot if you guys would go and support Bright Cellars and show them some love since they showed me some love. Okay, back to the video. First and foremost, I want to talk about the prevalence of anxiety in relationships. Like, this is a fairly common experience. Lots of people experience anxiety or fear or uncertainty, especially in new relationships where we're kind of sorting out, like, is this my person? Is this a good person? Like, what are the relationship norms here? Like, what are we doing? You know, it's uncomfy. For a lot of people, that's totally fair. But like, anxiety generally is not reflective. Even if you are a religious person, anxiety is not necessarily reflective of a lack of faith or a lack of trust in God or in other people. This is something that is very important for us to talk about because it tends to be the like fancy therapy word is negative core belief about yourself. But a lot of people will say mean things to themselves about like, well, why am I anxious about this relationship? That must mean that I don't trust this person, or that must mean that I don't have faith in them, or that I don't think they're a good person, or that I think the worst in people. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes anxiety can very much be reflective of like legitimate red flags in a relationship and that person being toxic or, problematic or not okay for you. But sometimes people are just anxious. Sometimes people have mental illness and we are anxious about all different types of things. This is especially common for people with OCD. Not that that's necessarily an anxiety disorder per se, but there's a lot of anxiety within OCD. And a lot of those obsessions and compulsions tend to be not founded in reality, but that doesn't make the anxiety, first of all, less real, or second of all, like reflective of you sucking or being a bad person or actually believing the fears that you have. A lot of times, especially with intrusive thoughts associated with anxiety, these thoughts just like appear. It's very important. I guess the point that I'm getting at here is that it's very important for us to talk about and normalize that thoughts don't necessarily mean anything.
Are your minds blown?
It's very common for people with anxiety to have intrusive thoughts or to have fears that don't have some kind of deeper underlying meaning, that are like revealing of some deep, dark, secret part of your soul. Sometimes they're just fears, and that's okay. It's very much a workable issue, something that you can work with a therapist about, but it's also something that you can work on as an individual and experience like a greater level of peace around. But it just pushes my fucking buttons because this is a very predatory tactic that people in religious cults use to try and suck you deeper into their religious beliefs, because they tell you, well, if you're experiencing anxiety, you don't trust God enough. And you know how you can fix that? Subscribe to my Patreon and do this, 300 question questionnaire and read my books and buy our stuff and go to church and more. Like, be more in the Kool-Aid, do more of the religious things. And it's very, very dangerous because what you're doing is preying on people with mental illness, and it's not a good look. It's not a good look.
Then though, I just want to say that if you don't make it to the end of this video, I want you to know about because this
Boo. We're not letting her talk about her books and her Patreon. We're skipping forward. What?
You're saying that to me.
No. No, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. Awesome. I love that for us. Cats crying, dogs barking. All we're missing is the neighbor leaf blowing, and we have the trifecta.
It makes a great gift for anybody. So highly recommend it. Also, if you recently went through a breakup, or maybe you're single and you're really struggling to trust God with your singleness, then you are going to love our latest book.
How many fucking books do they have? We've spent a solid 3 minutes doing book promotion in this video.
Shop. Okay. We'll see if I can actually talk in this video. I don't know. But I remember I was in a relationship that was ridden with anxiety. And it was not my relationship with Zach, but a relationship before that, where I thought I was going to marry the guy. We were on a path that seemed really good for a while. I share all about that story also in relationship that I thought I was going to end in marriage and didn't. Anyways, there was so much anxiety. And in a lot of ways, I think that my anxiety in that relationship was rooted in some fears of things I was seeing and experiencing in the relationship that truly were red flags, but I was trying to suppress them and ignore them. So of course, there was a lot of anxiety in my heart about the relationship.
It just astounds me how they run face first into the point all the time and still miss it. This is a very common thing that happens, Kristen. If Kristen or Bethy ever watch this video, hi. This is human, this is very normal, and this is why I take issue with your content. When we do the thing where we try to suppress our emotions and we try to shove them down and stop feeling them, those emotions don't go anywhere. They're still existing in your body, in your mind, in your consciousness, and you're just suppressing them, you know? The issue with this is that those emotions are going to come out eventually, and they continue to plague you just on like the sort of underlying, like the below the surface level, until you eventually are forced to deal with them. Oftentimes this manifests in anxiety, in like, it's not like subtle, but like low levels of depression. The fancy therapy word is like disorder conduct, but like issues. Mental illness, there's issues that happen. You will notice changes in your mood, issues with your ability to function, issues in your day-to-day life if we're actively doing this thing where we're never giving ourselves space to feel. This is the thing that a Girl Defined peddles as like the way to deal with your emotions is just don't give it to God, read our shitty devotional, and like don't feel your feelings. Just like gaslight, girl boss, gatekeep, get the fuck out of there, don't feel your feelings and it'll be fine. But then we're talking about in this video how she was suppressing her feelings of fear in the relationship and that caused her to feel anxious. Hello? Like, 911, is there anyone home? What is happening?
I should have addressed what I was actually seeing in the relationship. That would have been huge. And I did eventually, which is why it ended. Anyways, but for you, if you're in a relationship and maybe you feel that anxiety in your heart, those worries, those things that are keeping you up at night, and you just don't know, maybe that's a sign it's unhealthy, or maybe I'm fearful unnecessarily. You know, maybe this is just part of the process. Like, how do you know? I obviously don't know the ins and outs and details of your exact relationship story. And so please take this as general advice. Our biggest counsel to you every time is find a godly woman in your community, a mentor who can walk with you personally and your story and your struggles and your concerns, your fears, your ups and downs, your questions.
Okay, whatever. She's going to go on and on about that. This whole story about how she is sharing this advice because she has had a relationship that was riddled with anxiety feels like sour grapes to me. It seems like they're, again, like this reminds me of the Allie B. Stuckey video that we did. If you haven't watched that, I will link that in the card up here. But it reminds me of that video where this person had a negative experience in their personal life. She was probably gaslighted by the people and the godly mentors that she leaned on, and used that as a way to justify her religious beliefs instead of, like, you know, initiating a deconstruction process like some people do when they go through something traumatic at the hands of religion. It just pushed her deeper into the beliefs, and she is now projecting that onto other people. And so this negative life experience that she had, she's using as proof and as like backing for the things that she believes, and is like insisting now that you do these things because of her life. This is very toxic and very inappropriate. Not to say that there's anything wrong with talking about how our anecdotal experience informs our lives. I think there's space for that on the internet, especially. Everyone is allowed to talk about their own lives and their own experiences, and especially with mental illness, there's a lot of space and use in, you know, unpacking how that looks and how that impacts people's lives. But the thing that frustrates me is this insistence that because this happened to one person, this is the way that it must be for all people. This is why I lean so heavily on research on my channel, because I really want to make this channel and this content primarily informed by evidence-based practice and by things that we can justify and back up in the research. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with including anecdotal experience when it suits the occasion, but to form an entire business, an entire internet presence, an entire cultural belief around like this one experience and then insisting that all other women must do this thing because it happened to Kristen one time is like, ooh, yikes.
And give you biblical wisdom for your situation. Okay, but I hope these general application points that I'm going to share with you about anxiety in a dating relationship are really helpful, and I think they're going to be. So the thing that we can count on from scripture is that anxiety is never a solution, right? And we know anxiety isn't a solution because we see in Philippians 4:6-7.
Does anyone think that anxiety is the solution? I've never met an anxious person, myself included, that is like thankful or insistent that their anxiety is a good thing. Most people, especially people with a clinically significant level of anxiety or a diagnosis, don't find it to be something that's enjoyable or that we're holding on to for dear life. That's weird.
Then it says, do not be anxious about anything. And this verse includes your romantic relationship. So,
oh my God, I'm so much less anxious now. Oh, I feel so much better. Thank you, Kristen. That was great.
God is saying, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, including your romantic relationship, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God.
Also, like, is this supposed to be some kind of transformative, life-changing moment? I'm not even a religious person anymore, and I'm well aware of this Bible verse. Like, most people have heard this, I feel. This is like a very common, like, this is the Instagram bio Bible verse that all of the white Christian girls use. Like, is this supposed to be doing something?
The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. So this verse is so encouraging in Philippians 4 because it's telling you in your relationship, do not choose anxiety. Whether it's a good or bad relationship, don't choose the anxiety, but take those things that you're thinking, you're processing, you're worried about, take those things to the Lord in prayer with thanksgiving. Let your request be made known to God.
Okay, first of all, very much take issue with this insinuation that people are choosing to be anxious. That's not how it works. As the expert in the room, I feel comfortable refuting that premise. People with clinically significant anxiety or like general worry really at all are not choosing to be anxious because they want to be. That's not how mental illness works. It's also very frustrating to me, this message that you can choose to not be anxious by just praying about it. No, don't get me wrong. Don't you fucking come for me in the comments. I actually talked about this in a video last week with Jen, if this goes up when I think it's going to, either last week or the week before, with Jen from Fundy Fridays. Therapists are not people who are vehemently anti-religion. I, as a therapist, have actively encouraged my clients to participate in prayer and devotionals and religious activities and Bible study and like religious stuff because it's helpful for their mental illness and it's a useful part of their treatment plan as supplementary material, as like supplementary actions, in the same way that we would encourage a client to embrace joyful movement or embrace like a hobby or a fun activity, in the same way that we would encourage clients to pursue social engagement, these types of things. Like they're supplementary activities that are meant to help prop up the clinically significant work that we're doing in therapy. The issue that I take is insisting that prayer alone is enough to treat a person's mental illness. That's not how it works. We know from the research that that's not true, unfortunately. I wish that it were. I mean, that would be really nice. It'd probably save people a lot of money. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. It's not quite that simple. And it's very disingenuous and, again, very predatory for Kristen to peddle this message that if you are anxious, just pray about it and that will fix it. And if it doesn't, that's your fault. That's because you're not religious enough, you don't trust God enough, and you're choosing to be anxious. Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit so fucking hard because it's predatory, it's shameful, and it's super fucking scary for people, especially like young, impressionable women who are watching this content as like young kids who are like all fucked up and like filled with shame and fear and weirdness, to see this like adult woman who seems to like have it all together to say, if you just pray about it, you'll feel better. Why don't you feel better? Maybe it's maybe it's your fault. Like, no, it's not. I'm telling you right now, sometimes people feel better with prayer. that's great. But if you don't, it's not because you suck. It's not your fault. That's just simply not how your mental illness works.
Okay, so God is saying there is an out for you to take your anxious and fearful thoughts to me in prayer, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that don't just become anxious, but take that to the Lord, the things that you're anxious about, okay? And
this is like so much the thing where we're just saying things now. Like, we're just word diarrheaing to get time on this video. Like, what, Kristen?
The place though, so biblically based, that is our framework for this conversation. Then I think we need to rewind a little bit, because in a dating relationship, what so often happens, and this was true for me in my relationship with that guy before Zach, was I started out the relationship with the wrong goal, okay? And what I mean by that, and this is something that a lot of us can fall into, is my goal was, I think I'm gonna marry this guy, and so we need to figure things out so we can get married, right?
Where do you think people would get that idea from, Kristen? Where would people absorb this idea that marriage and relationships and hetero bullshit is the norm and the thing, the goal that all women should strive for? Oh, wait. It's you. It's you and the culture that you actively prop up. Again, this is the thing where they participate in this culture of shaming women, of reinforcing these very harmful stereotypes, these very harmful stigmas about women, about femininity, about marriage and sex and relationships and all this stuff, right? They're like fixated. This face that she's making is terrifying. Like their content, they endlessly talk about marriage and sex and relationships and boys, and marriage and sex and relationships and boys. These people are pushing 40 at this point, and we're still fucking talking about seasons of singleness. But you're telling me that you're now coming out against, you're taking a stand against going into relationships with the goal of marriage. What? Like, what are you saying? Like, doesn't make any sense. And don't get me wrong, I think we're going to talk about this later. I think there's definitely some pivoting that's happening. I think Girl Defined is aware of how often they're getting dragged on the internet, and so they're trying to kind of like pivot a little bit. I'm not convinced that it's coming from the right place. We'll talk about that. But like, whatever. From a harm reduction point of view, I don't hate the idea that they're giving people an out to not pursue relationships with the sole purpose of marriage. But it is frustrating to me that we're not acknowledging that you have actively participated in perpetuating this stigma in this culture in the first place.
And I know some of you are relating to that, thinking, yeah, like that's kind of how I feel right now. But the truth is, you don't know the end result of a relationship when you start that relationship with that guy, right? You don't know how it's going to end. And I think we often view a relationship that ends in marriage as good and beautiful, and a breakup as bad and horrible. But the truth is, every relationship is a journey, should be a journey to glorify God and discover whether or not you and this person should get married. That's the point of the journey. You're on it. You're seeking to glorify God in every aspect of the romantic relationship, and you're on a journey to discover if you should commit to spending the rest of your life with this person, right?
Okay, so here's the thing. Do I disagree with her about the purpose of relationships being to glorify God? Yes, obviously. I don't care about that. I'm not religious. I don't subscribe to Christian beliefs, and so I don't, whatever, we disagree about that. However, again, this is what I was saying, where I think there's very clearly an attempt to pivot the messaging here with like this, not every relationship has to end in marriage, and that's okay, and it's still a successful experience because you're basically just figuring out whether that's the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Like, again, from a harm reduction point of view, I don't hate this. I don't think this is the worst. I appreciate that there's the pivoting happening. I wish that they would fucking take accountability for the ways that they have harmed people and the way that they have perpetuated this stigma and this culture that is far and away hurting people, because, the reality is that people absorbed that message and then walked away and then potentially will never see this. And so, like, that bothers me. But, like, it is what it is, I guess. It's not the worst.
So there can be two successes. One, the answer is yes, and it's green lights, and it's a godly relationship, and the wise people in your life, and you've prayed about it, and blah, blah, blah. You get married, success. Or throughout the journey, God reveals to one of you or both of you through red flags, through just maybe nothing problematic, just really you discover you're really different, or maybe there's a lot of temptation and pitfall and it's just not a healthy relationship, you break up, okay? Both outcomes are successful and the goal was accomplished. You discovered whether or not you should marry that person, okay? And so that's the thing, is when you start your relationship, I think a lot of anxiety comes when you kind of predetermine that you're probably going to marry this guy, that he's probably the one, and now you just need to make sure to get to the altar, right? So you have to rewind and ask yourself, am I extremely open-minded about this relationship? Am I surrendered? Do I have open hands before the Lord saying, God, I know this is a journey. I'm taking it one step at a time. Whether this ends in marriage or a breakup, I'm seeking your will. Please make this clear throughout this process.
Okay, this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about here. This, I think, like this message that she's giving, again, from a harm reduction point of view, I don't think this is the worst. I do agree with this perspective that regardless of what the outcome is at the end of a relationship, ultimately, if you've learned something about yourself or you've had valuable experiences in, conflict resolution or communication or boundary setting or whatever, like that's successful and that's useful, right? Like that's valuable lived experience and it's worth having. This is why most people advocate that you shouldn't just fucking marry the first person that you ever meet and then not kiss them or not have sex with them until you get to the altar. But that's neither here nor there. But it is very frustrating to me that she says this without acknowledging that the culture that she operates within, and again, that she has helped to perpetuate, places a lot of value on women's worth being as a partner, as a helpmeet. This like fixation with the end goal ultimately to be getting married and to have babies and like do the thing, like the Christian woman thing, is very, like, it's a crushing weight for a lot of people who live within this culture. And so it's, I think, a lot easier said than done to say like, oh, well, I'm just having open hands and choosing to be super open-minded about it. Like, yeah, sure, I guess, until things don't work out and don't work out and don't work out, and you're starting to feel a crippling sense of shame and fear and guilt because the culture that you're living within is telling you that there's something wrong with you because you're not married by the time that you're 19 years old. Like, that's scary, and we're not acknowledging that that's a real thing that exists. And again, it's this very gaslighty energy of like, it's easy breezy and everything's fine, and like, no, it's not. It's just because you like slap a flower headband on it doesn't make it any less threatening or upsetting.
And as you have that open-handedness and that surrender of the outcome, and you're viewing each outcome as a success because the goal is to discover whether or not you should get married, I think that alone will take off so much of the pressure, so much of the anxiety that you may be feeling from the start, okay? That's the first hugest thing. Second, and I've already hinted at this, I kind of already gave this point away, but recognize that it is a journey and trust God for the current day at hand. In a relationship, we just want to know. And I remember feeling this, like, I just want to know, is it going to work out or is it not going to work out? Like, you hit some bumps and you're like, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no. And you're trying to answer a question that can be answered until the end of the journey. And for some people, the journey may be 3 months, 6 months, a year to discover whether or not you should marry this person, right? It's different for each relationship.
Okay, I also wanted to acknowledge this because I don't think this is the worst. This is a pretty stark contrast from the message that we got from Paul and Morgan about how you should only date someone for like 2 fucking months before you know if you're gonna get married or not. So like, bonus points, I guess, for not perpetuating that idea. But most of the advice in this video so far can be summed up as like, just don't. If you're curious about how to not be anxious in a relationship, have you tried not? Thanks, Kristen. Like, that's super fucking helpful to no one. Also, sorry if you can hear my cat. She is a bodybuilder and she is trying to break the door down. I'm probably not going to let her in today though because we are on a tight schedule. So just sorry.
But you can enjoy so much more of the relationship by just trusting God for the outcome and then trusting Him for the day at hand. And then even enjoying the day at hand. So like today, what is true for today? You don't know if you're going to marry this person yet, right? You're in this relationship. You think maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know where you are, but you can trust God for today and then you can enjoy today. You can enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, trust God with the outcome. Okay?
Okay. Oh, I'm really trying to not pause this video every 5 seconds, but I also wanted to talk about this. She makes it sound as if you're like a helpless bystander in your own relationship. I want to be super clear. You should have some autonomy in getting to decide whether you marry the person or not. I know that it's more so like a verbiage thing. That people in these religious circles use this phrasing a lot. Like, I get that. But I do think it sends the wrong message. Like, you're supposed to be just like wandering around waiting for skywriting to appear from God to be like, thumbs up, buddy. Like, that's weird to me. You are very much allowed, even if you are a religious person, to exercise some level of control or decision making in your own relationships. This idea of just like waiting to discover if it's like, there is learning and probably like an appropriate amount of time that should pass before we make that decision. But just like this attitude of like you're just waiting around to find out is super weird to me.
The next thing, and this is so important, I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, but stay connected to a godly mentor. If you don't have a mentor, find a godly woman, start praying for this. We have so many blog posts over at girldefined.com. Just search mentorship, and you can find exactly how to even like ask a mentor, how to find a mentor, how to start praying for a mentor, what to look for in a mentor. Find a godly woman, ask her to walk with you through this relationship journey. Someone that you can ask the hard questions to, you can share your deepest concerns and fears, someone that you can get advice from, hopefully a married woman. That would be so helpful. Having a godly mentor involved intimately with you and your side of things will be so helpful as you seek to navigate this relationship. Because trust me, and you know this, when you're in it, you can get in such a bubble that you don't even see some things that can be so obvious to people on the outside.
Okay, this is one of the things that pushes my buttons the most, because is it inherently a bad thing to have a mentor, or to have like advice and like support from your community? Obviously not. But I do think it's important for us to talk about the subtext here, because to me, this reads very much as an attempt to keep people in the circle. You know, like, it's not just any mentor. You can't talk about this with a secular therapist. You can't talk about this with like just anybody. Has to be a godly woman, hopefully a married godly woman. I guess with the intention that they'll steer you in the direction of following the religious rules and mores, which is problematic in my opinion, because sometimes, a lot of times, especially within this specific culture that Bethy and Kristen operate within, there are problematic beliefs and expectations and views that can be very harmful to people. And if someone is in the middle of initiating a deconstruction process, having a godly mentor who is actively discouraging you from making decisions that feel the safest for you as an individual is very, very damaging. It's very, very painful. So I am very frustrated by this. You know, again, it's like this sort of, we are like smiling through it and talking about it in a way that seems like it's super fun and really cool, but it's actually kind of toxic and scary. Because the other thing about this that I wanted to point out is, again, that Bethy and Kristen, if these religious views are as life-changing and wonderful and amazing as you say they are, you wouldn't have to try so hard to keep people sucked into your fucking culture. If it really is this amazing and transcendent experience, people wouldn't be leaving in droves, and you wouldn't have to try so hard to fucking suck people in and keep them sucked in. You wouldn't have to limit their exposure to the outside world to keep them from fucking escaping you. So, like, when people say stuff like this, be very wary of what the subtext of that is and why they might be saying that, because if they have a vested interest in limiting the exposure that you have to outside resources and to exposure to different beliefs, and they find that very threatening, bad sign. Very bad sign.
That was true for me. It took me so much longer to end a really unhealthy relationship because I was so blinded by my goal of thinking it was just going to end in marriage that I couldn't even see so many of the red flags that were very obvious to everybody else. So have that godly mentor, connect with her on a regular weekly basis if you can. Okay, the next thing to help fight anxiety in your relationship is have a plan for getting to know his heart. I know so many of you will say like, we're getting to know each other, but I just don't really know. Like, I just don't know him and I'm struggling to know how he really feels about certain things or what he believes about certain things or certain theological issues. Like, it's just hard. And so because so many of you have asked us, like, how do you get to know, like really get to know his heart and vice versa, we created a free downloadable. You've probably heard us talk about it, 136 questions to ask in a relationship. And you can get that.
Stop it. I thought that was a meme. Oh my God. That's real? Stop it. I thought that was a joke. Oh my God. Oh no. That's so embarrassing for them. I've seen people on the internet talk about their questionnaire. I thought people were being hyperbolic. I didn't realize that this was a real thing. Can we download this? Can you look that up on your phone, please? Incognito mode, that for sure.
Yeah, I only ever look at stuff in incognito.
Pause, hold, please.
Yeah, here they are. Have you ever been in trouble with the law? If so, explain the extent and the circumstances. Is this a job interview? What about the Lord's Supper? Who should participate in these sacraments? What's that? What is your view on the celebration of Christmas and Easter? Can you describe your relationship with your grandparents? Can you describe your relationship with your friends? Have you ever been peer dependent? How did you resist this?
Peer dependent?
Peer dependent.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Dependent on your peers. Are you ever manipulative of others?
As if a manipulative person is ever going to answer that honestly.
If they're a good manipulator, they wouldn't.
Recognizing we are all imperfect, in what one or two areas do you think God wants you to improve most? Ew. Describe your relationship with your mother. Was it honoring? Was it obedient? Obedient?
View of money in general. How much to the church?
That's invasive.
What kind of vacations are appropriate and helpful for us?
What is this question? What are your habits regarding sleep? This is so invasive.
Are you a virgin? If not, please explain.
No.
Are you involved with any of the following? Constant thoughts about sex.
Yeah, pornography.
Masturbation. Homosexuality. Pornography. X-rated video games. Internet sites.
Internet sites. My favorite. Okay, we're gonna make a whole different video talking about this questionnaire probably because this is hilarious.
Let's get out of the sauce. That's a whole nother.
I know. Okay, sorry. That's hilarious. And also very embarrassing. Don't get me wrong. I know that getting to know a person can be scary. And it's very much a thing that I have helped clients work through, prepping for initial meetings or dates or, like job interviews or, meeting up with friends or even like social engagements with people that you do know. It's a helpful, supportive factor to have like almost a list of topics or like things that you can kind of queue up in your mind, to have in your back pocket just in case you get overwhelmed. This is a very useful coping strategy. However, it is very strange that we have 136, also not 140, we couldn't do 150, 136 questions to ask a first date or to ask a new romantic partner. Like, ooh, yikes. A lot of the questions on there are also invasive and weird and just, this is like strong homeschooled vibes.
136. John 3:16. 3:16.
No, they didn't do that on purpose. Do you think?
No, I just made that up.
For free over at girldefined.com/questions. And that will help give you just some rails. It's not everything that you need to ask, but it's 136 really good questions that you could use as a great foundation, a great starting place at least, to get to know the heart of this guy. Because so much of the anxiety that you may be feeling is because you're like, I don't really know how to get to know him. And you get together and you hang out and you do things, but it's like you just don't feel like you're progressing that much in getting to know his heart on like things that are really important to you. And so this guide will give you the questions to ask without you having to sit there and feel like you're grilling him. You can make it really natural, just tackle a few every time you're together. He can ask the same ones back to you.
In what way is asking someone, are you a manipulative person, ever gonna come off as natural. Were you obedient to your mother? What's your hygiene like? Like, that's never gonna come off as normal. I'm sorry. Again, I want to validate the use of having questions like sort of in your back pocket to help grease the works when you're getting to know a person. This is a valuable coping skill. But it's important to do it in a way that promotes like a sense of safety and security in a relationship, and also like greases the works instead of making it awkward and weird. I also feel compelled to point out that if we didn't perpetuate this culture that promotes speed running relationships to get to marriage as fast as humanly possible and then to have children as fast as humanly possible, it probably wouldn't feel so hard to get to know someone, because these are things that we learn typically like in a regular setting over time. It's pretty easy to understand the nature of someone's relationship with their mother when you get to know them, you spend some time around their family, you watch them interact with their mother, you talk to their mother about them. We absorb these things through context when we give ourselves the time to actually fucking get to know a person. So we don't need questionnaires to like dive straight to the center of the issue when we do relationships in like a typical like a safer timeline.
It really helps you get to know his heart. Okay, and the last thing that I want to say on this topic, because there's so much more, but this is just giving you some things to think about in wrestling with anxiety in your relationship. The last thing is acknowledge every flag. And what I mean by this is we often talk about red flags, which we do have a whole chapter on red flags in really, really good, really helpful. But there are more than red flags. Red flags are obvious, you know, red, it's like problematic things that are, it's like a stop sign saying, stop, you need to address this. This could be a deal breaker, maybe not, but you need to dig deeper into this. If you're seeing red flags, okay, but there are also yellow flags. It's not stop, it's just, hey, slow down a little. We're seeing some things that aren't great. Maybe you keep compromising on boundaries.
Sorry, my cat just like jumped at the door. It's fine. Sorry.
You've set morally, and you know, maybe that is a red flag, or maybe it's more minor things and you're like, okay, we need a revamp, we need some counsel. Like yellow flag, let's just push pause a little bit, you know, not push pause, but like slow down.
Yes,
okay, acknowledge those flags. Or you may be experiencing some green flags where it's like, go, like lights are green, you're seeing things where you're going, wow, this is amazing, you're learning more about
this isn't fucking traffic school.
Is this what it's like to listen to me talk sometimes? Because it's just like, shut up. We get it. We know. Like, we heard it already. Is this what it's like? Yeah, it is. Okay.
character, or you're seeing he's so consistent in what he says he's going to do, he does it, the way he honors you, the way he seeks godly mentorship, you know, just the relationship in general, the godly people are in your life, you're all praying about it, and it seems like, wow, God is really giving us the green lights to continue moving forward. Acknowledge that. So don't ignore. A lot of anxiety and fear comes from not acknowledging red flags, not being honest about them, yellow flags, not slowing down, or green flags, not saying, like, acknowledging the joy and the good that you're seeing and celebrating that and saying, wow, we're moving forward. This is so exciting, you know? And so I think it's so important that you actually acknowledge all three different types of flags, and that will really help you know what to do. Stop, slow down, or keep moving forward, right?
I don't disagree with this, but it is, again, very frustrating to me that she's talking about this while also actively participating in this culture that encourages people to speedrun relationships and value marriage above all else and to value relationships above all else. And we do the shoehorning of marriage thing where, like, the belief that marriage is a given, that all people must get married or want to get married, like, ugh. And also, again, it's just this energy of like, how do you deal with anxiety? Just don't be anxious. Like, thanks, Kristen.
Okay, so that was like such a massive flyover, but I hope that is at least somewhat helpful in your relationship and how to handle anxiety. Like we saw from Philippians 4, we do not.
Okay, it's mostly wrap up, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna try and sell us on her Patreon again. So we're gonna cut it there, and we're gonna so we can talk about it.
Well, if you move, it really messes me up.
Sorry, I just have a song in my heart.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I think it's fairly obvious that this is bad advice, but also just kind of like nothing burger advice. Like there wasn't really any meat and potatoes to dissect here other than their problematic beliefs. I think people could find more useful and actionable tips about dealing with anxiety just by following therapists on Instagram. This is something that I encourage people to do a lot, especially as therapists are learning that social media is a valuable way to advertise their private practices. It's becoming more and more normal for us to give away like psychoeducation tips and tricks and things like that on social media. So following licensed, credentialed, professional therapists who went to real universities on Instagram, TikTok, social media generally can be a super useful tool. So I would encourage you to do that if you're looking for more tips. But I at the end of all of these videos, I always talk about this, but I want to be clear, even if you are a religious person, it is very much possible to have religion and a relationship with God and to participate in that culture while also honoring that your mental health and your mental illness is real and matters, and that you are also allowed to work on that. Being anxious or having mental illness does not mean that you don't trust God or that you're sinful or wrong or bad. All of these beliefs that Girl Defined pushes are so detrimental and they're so harmful to people. So I really want to encourage people to stay away from their content. Please don't go hate watch their stuff. Please don't go subscribe just to like get the tea and see the drama. Like please don't, because it's not good. It just encourages them to keep doing it, and like just generally is not, it's bad vibes. So just don't, okay? That's it. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like the video and subscribe to the channel. We make fundy content about once a month, so turn the notification bell on if you want to get notified when those go up. And then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.